Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the world through the lens of YouTuber Ben Thomas, also known as Sisyphus55. We're going to be unpacking a really profound, yet almost entirely silent psychological conflict that pretty much all of us deal with at some point. We're talking about the deep, developmental compromises we make just to be accepted, and the very real mental and physical costs of living life behind a protective mask. So, let's just jump right into it. I want you to hold up a mental mirror to your own life for a second. Have you ever found yourself just nodding along, agreeing, and constantly trying to please others, while slowly feeling like you're completely losing touch with who you actually are? It's an exhausting daily performance, isn't it? But why do we do it? Why is it so incredibly difficult to just be ourselves? Well, to answer that, we really have to look at the work of physician and author Dr. Gabor Maté. His insights, brilliantly synthesized by Thomas, reveal something pretty shocking. Chronic agreeableness isn't just some quirky personality trait. It is a tragic compromise. It's actually an outdated survival mechanism that we're forced to adopt back in childhood. You see, when a child's environment can't handle their raw, messy emotions, that kid quickly learns a harsh lesson. To be authentic is to risk abandonment. And this hits right at the heart of the primordial conflict: attachment versus authenticity. Think about it. A child is completely, 100% dependent on their caregivers. They literally cannot survive without them. So when that child is faced with the dilemma of either expressing their true organismic gut feelings or suppressing them to remain an acceptable, good kid, well, attachment always wins. Every single time. The child will automatically, unconsciously suppress their true self just to secure that safety and love. Section 1. The lethal cost of niceness when the mask becomes a trap. So what happens when we grow up? That brilliant childhood survival strategy dangerously evolves into a really debilitating psychological trap. When that mask hardens, it forms what psychologists call the type C personality. Now here's the kicker. Society absolutely loves the type C individual. They're the nice people, the ones who compulsively put everyone else's expectations entirely ahead of their own. Society praises them as these highly moral, compassionate saints. But behind the scenes, the reality is a harsh state of profound self-alienation. And these traits, things like an extreme concern for others or a rigid sense of duty, they completely fly under the radar. We just call it being compassionate. But for a type C personality, this isn't genuine kindness. It's compulsive. It's toxic. You end up repressing your own healthy self-protective aggression and somehow taking full responsibility for how everyone else feels. You're not being nice because you actually want to be. You're doing it because you're absolutely terrified of disappointing anyone and losing that attachment. And the toll this takes? It's not just mental. It is severely psychosomatic. Let this sink in for a second. As Dr. Maté points out, emotional repression literally disarms your biological immune system. Chronic emotional suppression acts as a biological stressor that fundamentally compromises your physical health. Neglecting your own identity just to please the world can manifest as a literal physical breakdown of your body. You are quite literally placing your health at risk just to feel worthy of love. Section 2. Performing in hyperreality, the digital amplifier. Okay, let's zoom out sociologically for a minute and see what happens when you plug that incredibly vulnerable psychology into our modern digital world. Drawing on theories from thinkers like Byung-Chul Han and Jean Baudrillard, it becomes clear that our digital interfaces are completely weaponizing our desperate need for attachment. We live in what's known as the society of the like. It's an achievement society where we're constantly self-optimizing, constantly performing for external validation. We've basically replaced authentic, organic human connection with this hyper-real hall of mirrors, where we're just desperately chasing likes to prove we exist. To really understand this, we need to look at how our very sense of identity has devolved. Historically, we started with sincerity, simply committing to your role in the community. Then we moved to authenticity, which was this romantic pursuit of finding your unique, original self. But today, we've arrived at prophilicity. Prophilicity is identity shaped entirely by second-order observation, meaning you aren't actually building a self anymore, you are curating a profile based entirely on what average opinions and digital algorithms are going to rate highly. And the tragic irony is captured perfectly right here. Because of our deep-seated childhood need for approval and attachment, we become willing participants in this exhausting digital machine. We over-identify with these curated profiles. We literally become tools to the tool, passively consuming this endless stream of hollow validation that, ironically, leaves us feeling more alienated and depressed than ever before. Section 3. Rogers and the Good Life. Dismantling the defenses. So, the big question: how do we break out of this vicious cycle of performative attachment and the physical illness that comes with it? Well, we can turn to the legendary humanistic psychologist Carl Rogers, who completely flips the script on what we consider the good life. We're taught by our achievement-obsessed society that the good life is some fixed state of perfection you eventually unlock, like a video game achievement. But Rogers clarifies that it is absolutely not a destination. It is an open, fluid, and highly courageous process of becoming. It's about engaging dynamically with reality rather than trying to perfectly control it. Making this change requires a massive mental shift. We have to actively move away from what Rogers calls defensiveness. Where your ego is totally locked up, running on those outdated childhood schemas, constantly performing for an audience. Instead, we have to lean into an openness to experience. And that means getting vulnerable. It means actually feeling your true feelings, trusting your gut again, and fluidly participating in life, rather than just acting out a role on a stage. I want you to just take a brief second to really digest Rogers' words here. Moving away from people-pleasing and external validation, it isn't easy. In fact, it is terrifying. It is not for the faint-hearted. It requires profound courage to step out of those rigid, safe boundaries you've built and to launch yourself fully into the unpredictable stream of life. Section 4. Reclaiming your authentic self. Beyond the data. To actually put this into practice, cognitive scientist John Vervaeke offers a brilliant framework that acts as a concrete map to heal this self-alienation. Vervaeke categorizes how we engage with the world, and in our digital age, we are completely obsessed with the top tier, propositional knowledge. That's just consuming endless data, facts, and opinions. But Vervaeke argues that to find true meaning, we have to shift down to the deepest foundation, participatory knowledge. This is a deep, interconnected resonance with reality and with other people. It's about actually being present in the world, not just doom-scrolling data about being present. So, bringing it all together, what are the real takeaways from all this? First and foremost, you've got to leave the self-blame behind. Your people-pleasing? That was an incredibly smart survival tactic when you were a kid. But listen, you aren't a kid anymore. It's time to honor those internal gut signals you've been suppressing for decades. You have to actively step away from that chronic agreeableness, set firm boundaries, and realize that honoring your authentic self is literally the only path to true emotional and physical health. Ultimately, it all comes down to a choice. The tension between attachment and authenticity demands an answer from you today. Are you going to continue to safely perform for the approval of others, shrinking yourself down just to fit into a digital profile? Or are you willing to risk the rejection of the crowd to finally, genuinely, meet yourself? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll leave you to ponder that question.
So, picture a moment from your own life. Like maybe it was yesterday, or maybe it was a decade ago.
Right.
You are sitting across a table from someone. Could be a manager, a partner, or, a parent.
Right.
And they make a request.
And you instantly feel it.
Yes, internally, your nervous system just lights up, your stomach tightens, your jaw clenches, and there's this very clear primal voice inside your head screaming, absolutely not.
Right, the biological red alert.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then, almost as if someone else is operating your vocal cords, you smile, you nod, and you say, sure, I can do that. No problem at all.
Yeah, it's an incredibly common phenomenon. I mean, we've all done it.
We have.
But if you actually pause and look at it objectively, it's really terrifying. You are essentially witnessing the hijacking of your own autonomy in real time.
Wow, yeah, the hijacking of your autonomy.
Right, because your biological hardware is sending a massive distress signal, but your behavioral software deliberately overrides it just to maintain social harmony.
And we rarely even question it. We just call it, being polite or being a team player, being agreeable.
Which society loves.
Totally. But what if that split-second decision to just swallow your own truth isn't some harmless social reflex? What if it's actually the visible tip of an enormous, unseen psychological iceberg?
I can tell you it absolutely is.
Well, today, we are wading into some deeply murky waters. We're exploring the profound, often totally silent conflict that sits right at the center of the human experience.
The battle between attachment and authenticity.
Exactly.
Okay.
The brutal battle between our fundamental need for attachment and our inherent drive for authenticity. Today's deep dive explores why we sacrifice who we are just to be loved.
And it is a battle that doesn't just shape our personalities. It literally dictates our physical health and constructs the whole architecture of our modern society.
It's massive.
Yeah.
And to guide us through this, we're unpacking a really brilliant synthesis of sources today. Specifically, we're looking at the philosophical and psychological video essays of the creator Ben Thomas, who's known online as Sisyphus55.
His work is fantastic.
It really is. Thomas has taken the clinical observations of physicians like Dr. Gabor Maté and layered them over the humanistic psychology of Carl Rogers.
While also bringing in cultural critiques from people like Byung-Chul Han, Jean and Jean Baudrillard.
So we are really covering some ground today. We're going to examine why children are biologically forced to suppress their, quote, organismic truth to secure love.
And how that transforms into a hidden, highly toxic type C personality in adulthood.
Right, and the severe psychosomatic toll of wearing that mask. Plus, we'll look at how the modern digital landscape, this society of the like, has been explicitly designed to monetize this exact developmental trauma.
It's a lot to unpack, but it all connects perfectly.
It does, because if a child learns to mask their anger to keep their parents around, that neural pathway doesn't just evaporate at age 18.
No, not at all.
They step into the adult workforce with a nervous system still acting like a terrified toddler. So let's start at the very beginning. Let's look at the primordial conflict, as outlined by Gabor Maté. What exactly is happening in the brain of a human infant?
So, to really understand this, we have to look at evolutionary biology. A human infant is what we call an altricial creature.
Altricial.
Yeah, altricial. Unlike a foal that can, stand up and run away from a predator within hours of being born, a human baby is uniquely, profoundly helpless.
Basically a potato for the first year.
Pretty much. It cannot forage, it can't defend itself, it can't even regulate its own body temperature.
Right.
Therefore, attachment to a caregiver is not some psychological luxury. It is the absolute non-negotiable biological imperative.
Because without it, they literally die.
Exactly. The infant's brain is hardwired with one primary directive: do whatever it takes to stay close to the giant mammals who provide the food and physical protection.
So survival literally equals proximity to the caregiver.
Precisely. And that is the attachment drive. But running parallel to that is the second drive, which is authenticity.
Okay, let's define that, because authenticity has become a bit of a buzzword lately.
It has.
Like finding your true self or whatever.
Right. But in this developmental context, authenticity is not some high-minded philosophical concept about expressing your unique artistic vision.
Right, we're talking about a baby.
Exactly. We are talking about raw, visceral, biological truth. It's the gut instinct. It is the infant's ability to accurately read its internal state and express it.
So if it's hungry, it cries.
If it's frustrated, it screams.
Yeah.
It is the organism honestly communicating its reality to the world.
Okay, so we have these two biological drives. The drive to stay attached to the parent and the drive to honestly express internal feelings. The friction begins when those two things collide, right?
Yes.
So what happens when the child's raw, authentic emotion threatens their attachment to their caregiver?
Well, let's say a toddler feels a completely natural, healthy surge of anger or frustration.
Which kids do all the time.
Constantly. But the caregiver, and this could be for a million reasons, maybe they're exhausted, maybe they're dealing with generational trauma, or they're just strictly adhering to a rigid cultural parenting norm, the caregiver cannot tolerate that anger.
So the caregiver withdraws their affection. Or they get angry in return.
Or they physically isolate the child.
Right. And in that exact moment, what is happening to the kid?
The child's nervous system detects a massive existential threat. The amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, just fires.
Because the child doesn't rationalize this like an adult would, right? They don't think, oh, mom is just stressed about work.
No, not at all. The infant's brain makes a rapid, unconscious calculation. If I express this anger, I lose my caregiver. And if I lose my caregiver, I die.
Wow, so the choice is literally between authenticity and survival.
And survival will win every single time. When forced to choose between expressing their true gut feelings and maintaining the love and protection of their caregivers, the child will automatically and completely unconsciously choose attachment.
They learn to suppress the offending emotion.
They swallow the anger, the sadness, even the exuberance if it's too much for the parent. They learn that to be acceptable, to be loved, they actually have to sever the connection to their own internal signals.
That is so dark when you really frame it as a survival mechanism. And the sources actually highlight a fascinating real-world example of this dynamic.
Yes, they do.
They critique a piece of traditional parenting advice that's been popularized by the clinical psychologist Jordan Peterson.
Right, the timeout method.
Yeah, so Peterson has argued that an angry child should be physically isolated, like made to sit alone in a room or on a step until they can, quote, behave properly, at which point they're welcomed back into the family unit.
And looking at this strictly through the lens of Maté's neurodevelopmental framework, setting aside any broader cultural debates about Peterson, this technique is a textbook mechanism for enforcing that exact attachment-authenticity conflict.
Right. The sources suggest it's a behavioral approach that completely ignores the biological reality of the child.
Because the child isn't just learning to, be polite.
Right. They are learning a terrifying conditional rule for survival. By isolating the angry child, the environment explicitly teaches them your raw emotions are unacceptable.
And worse, your physical proximity to your protectors, your literal safety, is entirely conditional upon the repression of your true feelings.
The underlying message the child internalizes is that their authentic self is dangerous.
It risks abandonment.
Right. So they put on the mask of the compliant, agreeable child.
And the real tragedy here is that because they do this during the most neuroplastic stages of brain development, and they do it so consistently, they completely lose awareness that it even is a mask.
It just becomes who they think they are. The
Yeah.
suppression becomes automated.
Exactly.
It makes me think of an analogy. Imagine being suddenly kidnapped and dropped into a dangerous, highly hostile foreign country.
Okay, I'm with you.
And the only way you can get food, shelter, and avoid being, executed is if you can convince the local warlords that you passionately love their traditional music.
Oh, well.
But it's a genre that, honestly, makes your ears bleed. You absolutely despise it. What would you do?
Well, you'd fake it, obviously. You would tap your foot, memorize the lyrics, smile, the whole 9 yards.
Right. You'd fake it to survive.
Hmm.
But here is where the neurobiology gets sinister. If you lived there for 10 years, and your physical survival depended on that performance every single hour of every single day, the cognitive dissonance would be unbearable.
Knowing you are lying while acting like you were telling the truth.
Exactly. It would eventually break your psyche. So to protect your sanity, your brain would do something remarkable. It would actually make you forget you were faking.
You would literally rewire your own preferences.
You would genuinely start to believe you love that music, because remembering that you hate it is just too dangerous a liability for your survival.
That is a phenomenal way to understand it. That's exactly it. The child doesn't just hide their anger from the parent, they successfully hide it from themselves.
They alienate themselves from their own gut feelings just to survive the environment. But if I'm playing devil's advocate here, I have to ask something.
Sure, go ahead.
If this suppression is a necessary, highly effective biological survival tool for a vulnerable infant, at what point does it actually become a problem?
What do you mean?
Well, you eventually grow up, right? You get a job. You don't need your parents for physical survival anymore. You can buy your own food.
Yeah.
So at what exact point does this life-saving armor become a prison for the adult?
Right. Well, that pivot is the core tragedy of human development.
How so?
Because the survival strategy of the infant becomes the pathology of the adult. Your brain doesn't just automatically update its operating system when you turn 18 and move out of the house.
There's no software patch for trauma.
Exactly. You carry that highly adaptive, deeply wired survival mechanism right into your adult relationships, your friendships, your career.
So the boss just becomes the surrogate caregiver.
Yes. And the romantic partner becomes the surrogate caregiver. Your nervous system continues to operate under the absolute delusion that if you displease them, you will die.
Wow. Which brings us to the creation of the adult mask. Once we understand why the child unconsciously chooses attachment over authenticity, we have to look at the specific psychological profile this creates.
Right, what Gabor Maté calls the type C personality.
Now, I think we are all culturally familiar with the type A personality. The aggressive, highly stressed, competitive executive who is traditionally associated with heart attacks.
The classic workaholic.
Exactly. But Maté argues that the type C personality is actually far more insidious, specifically because it hides in plain sight.
Yeah, type C individuals are the chronically nice people.
And we love nice people.
We do. They are the overly accommodating, endlessly agreeable individuals who compulsively place the expectations, needs, and feelings of other people above their own.
I really want to focus on that word you just used, compulsively. Because like we said, society universally praises people who are generous, dutiful, accommodating, and self-sacrificing.
We give them awards.
We literally canonize them as saints. So how is the listener supposed to tell the difference between someone who is genuinely compassionate and a good person and someone who is just compulsively acting out a childhood trauma response?
It is the critical distinction, and honestly, it's why the type C pathology is so dangerous. It is so heavily socially rewarded.
Right.
The difference between genuine compassion and a trauma response lies entirely in the internal biological state of the individual.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Genuine compassion is freely given from a place of grounded self-worth. If a genuinely compassionate person is asked to do something that violates their boundaries or just exhausts them, they can calmly say no.
But the type C person cannot say no.
Exactly. They literally can't. For the type C personality, the generosity is driven by terror.
Terror.
Yes, it is
Yeah.
driven by deep-seated anxiety. If a type C person tries to say no to an unreasonable request at work, they don't just feel a little guilty. They feel overwhelming physiological panic.
Because the body thinks it's going to die.
Right. They operate under two foundational unconscious beliefs. Number one, I'm entirely responsible for how other people feel. And number two, I must never, ever disappoint anyone.
Because to disappoint someone in their wired nervous system feels like the caregiver abandoning them all over again.
You nailed it.
It's like running a computer with a massive invisible background application that is just draining 80% of the CPU.
Yes.
On the outside, the screen looks completely fine. The spreadsheet is open, the cursor is blinking, everything seems totally normal. But internally, the battery is quietly dying because the fan is constantly worrying to manage this immense, unseen processing load of threat detection and boundary management.
That is exactly what it is. And to maintain this posture, the type C personality has to completely repress their healthy, self-protective aggression.
Now, we usually think of aggression as inherently bad or violent.
Right. In a societal context, sure, we frown on aggression. But in a biological, neuropsychological context, healthy aggression is just the energetic force required to set a boundary.
Oh, I see.
It is literally the immune system of the psyche.
That's a great phrase, the immune system of the psyche.
It's the ability to say, no, that is my time, or no, you actually cannot speak to me that way.
But the type C individual has entirely disabled this protective mechanism.
Because setting a boundary risks conflict, and conflict risks a loss of attachment. So they just absorb it all.
The sources bring in the work of the cultural anthropologist Ernest Becker here to explain the existential scale of this self-abandonment.
Becker's ontological paradox, yes.
Right. So Becker talks about this core paradox of being human. We all have two competing foundational desires. One is the desire to surrender, to belong to something larger than ourselves.
A community, a family, a religion, a corporation. We want to merge.
But the other competing desire is to expand as an individual heroic personality, to stand out, to be uniquely, undeniably ourselves.
And the tragedy of the type C personality is that they completely sacrifice the latter for the former.
They obliterate their individual expansion just to guarantee their surrender and belonging.
And they do this because of something the psychological literature calls the defectiveness schema.
I really want to unpack this because it feels absolutely central to the whole mask we're talking about. What is a schema, first of all? And how does the defectiveness one operate?
So in cognitive psychology, a schema is essentially a broad organizing principle. It's like a lens through which we make sense of the world and ourselves based on our early experiences.
Okay.
And the defectiveness schema is this deeply internalized, often unarticulated belief that one is fundamentally flawed, inherently unlovable, or just bad at their core.
Like a baseline assumption of I am inherently wrong.
Exactly. There is something broken about me. And if your baseline assumption is that you are inherently wrong, then you cannot ever just be yourself.
Because if you're yourself, people will see the brokenness.
Right. You have to constantly prove your right to exist. You have to maintain this flawless, exhausting facade of agreeableness and competence so that you are never, quote-unquote, found out.
Imposter syndrome on steroids.
Yes. Because if people saw the real you, the messy, angry, tired you, the schema tells you they would inevitably reject you. So you basically buy your right to exist by constantly serving others.
But all of this repression, swallowing the anger, burying the boundaries, running that massive background CPU drain of anxiety, it has to go somewhere, right?
Energy doesn't just vanish.
Exactly. The energy doesn't just evaporate. So if I'm exhausted from being a people pleaser, is it the literal physical exhaustion of smiling through gritted teeth that hurts me? Or is it the psychological venom of the resentment itself?
It is a highly toxic cocktail of both. And this leads us to what is probably the most sobering insight in the source material.
Which is saying something.
Right. The danger of the Type C personality is not just psychological. It's not just feeling unfulfilled or a bit tired.
The psychosomatic tool.
Yes.
Yeah.
The body keeps a literal biological score of every single time you swallow your own truth. Dr. Gabor Maté's clinical observations reveal this terrifying pattern linking the Type C personality profile to severe chronic physical illnesses.
Like what kinds of illnesses?
Autoimmune diseases, multiple sclerosis, and significantly higher likelihoods of cancer, as well as much poorer prognosis for recovery.
Now, I know some listeners might hear that and think it sounds fatalistic or almost mystical.
Like pseudoscience.
Right. The idea that being a people pleaser can literally give you an autoimmune disease sounds like a massive stretch to some people. How does that actually work mechanically in the body?
I get that hesitation, but it is pure observable biology. There's absolutely nothing mystical about it. We have to stop thinking of emotional repression as a purely mental exercise happening in some abstract ether.
Okay, so ground it in the body for us.
Emotions are physiological events. When you feel a strong emotion like anger or distress, your body mounts a physical stress response via the HPA axis.
Remind us what the HPA axis is.
It stands for the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal glands. So when a threat is perceived, cortisol and adrenaline flood your system. Blood flow shifts. Your body is physically preparing you to act, to set a boundary, to fight or flee.
It's the classic zebra seeing the lion on the savannah. The body prepares to run.
Exactly. And when the zebra runs, it expends that energy. The physical stress cycle completes itself.
Right, the cortisol gets used up.
But the Type C person doesn't run, they don't fight. When their boss demands they work the entire weekend, their HPA axis fires, the cortisol floods their system, but they just smile and say, "No problem at all, I'm happy to help."
Oh, wow. So the physiological stress response has nowhere to go.
It is chronically suppressed. And chronic emotional suppression acts as a constant underlying biological stressor.
It just sits in the tissue.
The nervous system is perpetually locked in a state of mild to moderate threat, even if the person looks completely calm on the outside.
And what does bathing your internal organs and tissues in chronic cortisol do to the body over decades?
It wreaks absolute havoc on the immune system. We now know that the nervous system and the immune system are intimately, inextricably connected.
They talk to each other.
Constantly. By constantly repressing healthy aggression, that psychic immune system we talked about earlier, you are confusing your physical immune system.
Oh, so?
Chronic cortisol literally suppresses the effectiveness of white blood cells. It promotes systemic, low-grade inflammation. In the case of autoimmune diseases, the macrophages and T cells become disoriented by these constant, unresolved biochemical alarms.
Wait, so they get confused?
Yes, and they literally begin to attack the body's own healthy tissue. The body absorbs the impact of the unexpressed resentment. Essentially, the body says no because the conscious mind absolutely refuses to.
That is just, it's chilling. The body says no because the mind refuses to. And the sources make a crucial, devastating point here about the socialization of women in Western society specifically.
Yes, this is a vital piece of the puzzle.
Because epidemiological data consistently shows an overrepresentation of women suffering from chronic, stress-related, and autoimmune illnesses. Things like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, and MS.
And if we view this epidemiological data through the lens of the Type C personality, it suddenly makes tragic sense.
Because of how women are socialized.
Exactly. Women are culturally trained and heavily socialized from a very young age to repress their anger.
Be the good girl.
Right. They are conditioned to be accommodating, to be the caretakers, and to constantly cater to the emotional needs of others, often at the direct expense of their own personal boundaries.
They are systematically trained to prioritize attachment and social harmony over their own authenticity.
Which means society is actively conditioning women into the exact personality traits that serve as chronic biological stressors.
It's a devastating intersection of cultural expectations and physical health. The societal demand for women to be endlessly agreeable to be these ultimate Type C performers is literally making them sick.
It's structural. It's not just an individual failing. It's a societal feature.
And this physical and emotional breakdown would be tragic enough if it were just happening in isolation, within individual families or workplaces.
Right.
But we don't live in isolation.
Yeah.
We live in a modern societal framework that has observed this human vulnerability, this desperate need for attachment, and figured out exactly how to industrialize it.
Oh yes, the digital age.
We really need to talk about how the digital landscape actively monetizes, incentivizes, and exacerbates this exact pathology. We are moving from the individual trauma to the collective trauma.
Welcome to the society of the like.
I love that phrase. And to set the philosophical stage for this, the sources bring in the 18th century philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
Rousseau made a brilliant, prescient distinction between two types of self-love.
Let's unpack those. What's the difference?
So he differentiated between amour de soi and amour propre. Amour de soi is a healthy, natural self-preservation.
Like keeping yourself alive.
Exactly. It is the dignity of surviving against the elements. It's tied to basic needs, finding food, building a shelter, staying warm in the winter. It is self-love grounded in biological reality.
Right. And the other one?
Amour propre is pride. It is an artificial sense of self-worth that is entirely contingent on the opinions of others.
Relative.
Completely relative. It is born out of social comparison and status. Amour propre isn't about surviving the winter. It's about making sure your neighbors know your winter coat is more expensive and fashionable than theirs.
And the sources argue that in the modern industrialized West, where basic physical survival amour de soi is largely guaranteed for many people, our entire existence has just become this hyper-competitive, agonizing game of amour propre.
We are totally obsessed with status because we have nothing else to fight for.
And then we introduce social media algorithms into that exact environment.
Gasoline on the fire.
Exactly. The philosopher Byung-Chul Han provides a devastating analysis of this shift. He argues that we have transitioned from a disciplinary society to an achievement society.
Yes.
Let me pause you there, though, because that's a pretty dense philosophical leap for us. What characterizes a disciplinary society versus an achievement society?
Sure, let's break it down. Think of Michel Foucault's analysis of the disciplinary society. In that model, behavior was controlled by external authoritarian forces.
Okay.
You had institutions, the church, the state, the factory boss, telling you exactly what you must do, or more importantly, what you must not do. The oppression was external. You clocked in, the boss yelled at you, you clocked out. You knew exactly who the enemy was.
But Han says that model is obsolete now.
Completely obsolete. In an achievement society, the control isn't external anymore, it's internal. We are no longer governed by the negative mandate of what we must not do. Instead, we are governed by the positive, endless potential of what we can do.
You can be anything.
Exactly. We are told we can be anything, achieve anything, optimize everything. We treat ourselves as projects. We become the entrepreneurs of our own identities.
Which leads to what Han calls auto-exploitation.
Yes, we exploit ourselves voluntarily. And the crazy part is we do it passionately.
The hustle culture.
We hustle. We track our sleep, we track our macros, our steps. We constantly work to improve our marketability, our aesthetic, our personal brand.
And because we are doing it to ourselves, under this illusion of freedom and self-improvement, there is no limit.
There is no factory whistle to send you home at 5 p.m. You are simultaneously the master and the slave driver is inside your own head.
Han uses the metaphor of the panopticon for this, right?
He does.
For listeners who might not know, the panopticon was a theoretical prison designed by Jeremy Bentham where a single guard in a central tower could potentially watch any inmate at any given time. But the inmates couldn't see the guard.
Right.
Because they might be watched at any moment, the inmates end up policing their own behavior.
But Han says today, we don't even need the central tower.
We carry the panopticon inside us.
We constantly surveil ourselves, evaluating our worth via digital metrics like followers, views, retweets.
It is the ultimate evolution of the defectiveness schema we talked about. Think about that terrified Type C child we discussed earlier, the one who learned to perform agreeableness to secure love from their parents.
Right.
Now imagine we take that deeply insecure child, hand them a smartphone, and build a global 204/7 slot machine that constantly measures their worth in real time.
We have industrialized our own deepest neurobiological vulnerabilities.
Let's give a concrete example of this, because I think everyone listening has felt it. Think about the last time you took a vacation. You were sitting on a beautiful beach, the sun is setting, it's a gorgeous moment.
Sounds perfect.
But instead of just experiencing it, you feel this subtle background hum of anxiety. You need to pull out your phone, frame the photo perfectly, apply a filter, and post it. Why?
Because if the anonymous digital crowd doesn't validate the experience with likes, did the vacation even happen?
Exactly. Are you even successful?
Hmm.
You are surveilling your own leisure time. You are literally working for the algorithm while on holiday.
That exact scenario is what the philosopher Hans Morler, who is cited in the sources, calls prophilicity.
Prophilicity. What is that?
It is a completely new form of identity formation.
How does it differ from how we used to build identity?
So historically, under a model of sincerity, your identity was tied to your fixed social role. You were the village blacksmith or a mother or a devout Catholic. You knew who you were based on your role in a local physical community.
Okay.
Then we move to an era of authenticity, which is the romantic ideal that your identity is a unique internal core you discover and express to the world.
Being true to yourself.
Right. But under prophilicity, your identity is forged through second-order observations.
Second-order observation, meaning I am watching you watch me.
Exactly. You construct a profile, an avatar, and your identity is determined not by how true it is to your inner core, but by how successfully that profile is perceived, validated, and engaged with by a generalized anonymous audience, what Mueller calls the general peer.
So you aren't trying to be true to yourself. You're trying to be true to the algorithmic expectations of your audience.
You curate an aesthetic of authenticity.
You see this all the time, online influencers posting the messy room photo dump or the crying in my car video to signal that they are real and vulnerable.
Right, but it's not actual vulnerability.
No, it is a highly curated, calculated performance designed to maximize engagement metrics.
It is the paradox of performed authenticity. And Jean Baudrillard's concept of hyperreality takes this to its terrifying conclusion.
Baudrillard is so relevant here.
He argued that in modern society, the digital representations, the symbols, the curated photos, what he called the simulacra, have actually become more real to us than actual physical reality.
The map has replaced the territory.
We care more about the picture of the beach than the actual sand between our toes. We care more about the relationship status on Facebook than the actual conversation at the dinner table.
And if your entire identity is wrapped up in maintaining this hyperreal profile, you're essentially trapped in an endless loop of the Type C personality, but on a global scale.
Yes, you feel empty inside due to your defectiveness schema.
So you project a perfected, marketable avatar into the hyperreal digital space, desperately begging the algorithm to give you the validation and attachment that you fundamentally lack.
But the tragedy is the algorithm doesn't love you. It cannot attach to you. It just monetizes your attention and sells your anxiety to advertisers.
Wow. And this constant, exhausting performance, this endless auto-exploitation, leads directly to the epidemic of societal burnout, severe depression, and the total atomization of organic community.
We become utterly alienated from ourselves and from each other, communicating not as human beings, but as competing hyperreal profiles.
Okay, let's take a deep breath.
Yeah, it's heavy.
We have painted an incredibly bleak, albeit highly accurate picture here. We start with a biological mandate to suppress our true selves just to survive childhood. We develop a Type C personality that chronically stresses our nervous system and literally makes us sick.
Right.
And then we plug our brains into a digital matrix that exploits that exact trauma for profit, turning us into exhausted managers of our own PR firms. The obvious screening question is, how on earth do we get out?
How do we unmask?
Right. How do we begin the process of unmasking when both our biology and our economy are completely rigged against us?
So to find a pathway out, the sources turn to humanistic psychology, specifically the pioneering work of Carl Rogers and his vision of the good life.
Now, Carl Rogers has a very specific definition of the good life and runs completely radically counter to the Achievement Society's version of endless optimization and perfect profiles.
He emphasizes right up front that the good life is not a fixed state of perfection. It is not an achievement to be unlocked.
You don't just win it.
No. You don't reach a certain level of mindfulness or hit a specific net worth or curate the perfect relationship and say, I have achieved the good life. I am done.
Instead, he defines it as a direction. It is a fluid, courageous process of becoming. It's a way of moving through the world rather than a destination.
Based on his extensive clinical work, Rogers identified 3 key observations or characteristics of a fully functioning person who is moving in this direction.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first characteristic is an increasing openness to experience.
What does that actually look like in the nervous system of someone who has been a Type C people pleaser their entire life?
It means moving away from defensiveness. Remember the Type C personality, or the person obsessed with their digital profile? Their ego is locked up tight behind a fortress.
Right.
They're constantly defending their facade, managing boundaries, terrified of any experience, criticism, or emotion that might expose their perceived defectiveness.
So openness to experience means what? Lowering the drawbridge.
Exactly. It means allowing yourself to feel your actual feelings, the terror, the joy, the anger, the grief, without immediately distorting them through the lens of past schemas or future anxieties.
You stop judging the emotion.
Mhm.
Like if you feel angry that your boss asked you to work the weekend, you don't immediately tell yourself, I shouldn't be angry, I need to be a team player. You just let the anger exist.
Yes. You observe the anger as valid biological data.
Okay, what's the second characteristic?
The second characteristic Rogers outlines is existential living. This is the ability to live fluidly within each moment. It means that the self emerges from the experience rather than the person twisting the experience to fit a preconceived, rigid identity.
I want to make sure I understand this. So instead of going to a party and thinking, I am the smart, cynical, introverted person, therefore I must stand in the corner and view this party cynically to maintain my brand.
Right.
You just go to the party, experience the music and the people, and let your reaction happen naturally. You might end up dancing, you might end up leaving early, but you don't predetermine the outcome.
You stop performing your life and actually start living it.
That sounds exhausting not to do.
It is. You stop treating yourself as a rigid object to be managed and optimized. And that leads directly to the third characteristic, an increasing trust in oneself.
Which is hard for people who have ignored their gut for 20 years.
Extremely hard.
Hmm.
But a fully functioning person does what feels right organically. They trust their gut, their internal biological signals first and foremost, rather than immediately looking to traditions, societal expectations, or external digital validation for guidance.
This sounds incredible. It sounds like the absolute antidote to the Type C personality. Instead of chronic agreeableness and fearing disappointment, you risk rejection by being real.
Yes.
You choose to give affection out of genuine, spontaneous love, rather than giving affection as a transactional manipulation to secure love.
It is a radical, terrifying shift from operating out of fear to operating out of love.
But I have to push back here on behalf of the listener because as liberating as this sounds, it also sounds existentially terrifying.
Oh, absolutely.
If we stop defending our identities, if we stop clinging to our profiles, our job titles, our carefully crafted roles, and we just become this fluid process, don't we risk losing our sense of self entirely?
It's the most common fear.
If I am constantly shifting with every new experience, how do I anchor myself? Am I just a leaf blowing in the wind?
It speaks to how tightly we cling to our defenses. We mistake our heavy iron armor for our actual skin.
Wow.
Rogers would argue that the rigid, defended self you are so terrified of losing isn't your true self anyway. It is just a childhood coping mechanism that got way out of hand.
The warlord music.
Exactly. Your true self isn't a static object you can lose. It is the very capacity to experience the present moment. By becoming fluid, you don't lose yourself. You actually finally encounter yourself.
You anchor yourself not in a rigid concept of who you are, but in the deep trust of your own organism's ability to navigate what is happening right now.
That is a beautiful way to phrase it.
That is a massive paradigm shift. But practically implementing it, that feels like a different challenge altogether. We can't just sit here, consume more self-help data from this deep dive, and suddenly become fluid.
No, you can't read your way into it.
If all it took was understanding the concept, we'd all be enlightened. We need an entirely new way of engaging with reality.
Which is exactly why the sources bring in the cognitive scientist John Vervaeke and his 4P framework. Vervaeke provides an actionable epistemological pathway out of this self-alienation and what he broadly terms the meaning crisis.
The meaning crisis.
Yeah.
Let's unpack Vervaeke's framework because it completely redefines how we think about knowing things. He argues that in the modern West, we are trapped in what he calls a propositional tyranny.
Propositional knowledge is basically knowing facts. It is knowing that something is true. I know that Paris is the capital of France. Or, in the realm of psychology and self-help, I know that I shouldn't be a people pleaser. Or, I know that my childhood trauma affects my immune system.
We have all the abstract data.
Yeah.
We can intellectualize our problems perfectly. I can sit in therapy and articulate exactly why I have a defectiveness schema.
But Vervaeke argues that propositional knowledge alone cannot heal us because it lacks embodied connection. We are drowning in data, but starving for actual wisdom.
Exactly. propositional knowledge doesn't change the nervous system.
To heal, to actually move out of alienation and into a meaningful, fluid life, we have to engage the other three forms of knowledge in his 4P framework.
So what's the second P?
The second P is procedural knowledge. This is knowing how to do things. It's building skills. It's the physical, embodied act of learning to ride a bike or learning how to cook or practicing a somatic breathing technique. It's moving from the head into the body.
Okay, got it. And there's the third P, which is perspectival knowledge.
This is situational awareness. It's knowing what it is like to be you right here, right now, in this specific context. It's the subjective feel of an experience. It's noticing the tension in your jaw when your boss walks into the room.
All right. And finally, the fourth P, which seems to be the ultimate antidote to the type C isolation and the hyperreal digital prophilicity participatory knowledge.
Participatory knowledge is knowing how to be with others and how to be with the world. It is the deep, fundamental connectedness that arises when you establish a reciprocal, active relationship with your environment.
What does that look like in practice?
It's the knowledge that generates affordances, the way a chair affords sitting or a close friend affords vulnerability. It's engaging with the world not as a distant, anxious observer trying to manage an outcome, but as an active, integrated participant.
And the sources connect this participatory knowledge to the sociologist Hartmut Rosa's concept of resonance.
Yes, resonance is the exact opposite of alienation. Alienation is the world feeling cold, dead, and demanding. Resonance is a relationship with the world that is reciprocal and leads to mutual transformation. You allow yourself to be moved by the world and you move it in return. You speak and the world vibrates back.
It requires letting go of the need to control the outcome.
Yeah.
It means stepping entirely out of Han's achievement society mindset, where every interaction is just a tool to optimize your brand.
And instead entering into a dynamic, unpredictable play with reality.
And crucially, this requires immense self-compassion, doesn't it?
Unbelievable amounts of self-compassion.
Because if you realize you've been living behind a mask, your first instinct is to get mad at yourself. But you cannot attack your own defenses. You can't hate yourself into loving yourself.
You have to look at those type C survival mechanisms, the people-pleasing, the chronic anxiety, the hypervigilance, with deep curiosity and gratitude rather than judgment.
You have to acknowledge this mask kept me safe when I was a highly vulnerable child. It was a brilliant strategy. Thank you. But I'm an adult now and I don't need you anymore. So, practically speaking, if a listener is sitting in their car or at their desk right now and realizes, wow, I have been wearing a mask my entire life. I have been choosing attachment over authenticity for decades and my body's exhausted. What is the very first step they can take today, using this 4P framework, to start building that participatory resonance with their true self?
The very first step is to forcefully shift out of the propositional and into the perspectival and procedural. Stop analyzing your past trauma for a moment.
Stop thinking about the data.
Right. Right now, notice your physical state. Are your shoulders tense? Is your breathing shallow? Notice what it feels like to be you in this exact moment. That's perspectival.
Okay.
Then take a procedural step. Do one small thing today purely for its own sake. Not for an external reward, not to please someone else, not to optimize your life, and certainly not to post on social media.
Take a walk without your phone.
Draw a terrible picture and throw it away. Cook a meal and just taste the spices.
You break the cycle of auto-exploitation, even if it's just for 10 minutes. You do something that has zero market value.
Yes. And regarding participatory knowledge, the next time you feel that familiar, terrifying compulsion to say yes, when your gut is screaming no, just pause. Feel the anxiety spike in your chest. Acknowledge the deep biological fear of rejection, and then take the terrifying risk of honoring your boundary.
Realize that to be loved truly, you must first be yourself.
Which inevitably means risking the loss of those who only ever loved your mask.
Risking the loss of those who only loved your mask. That is the ultimate cost of authenticity, isn't it? You might lose the attachment, but you gain your life.
It's the only way out.
It brings us full circle. As we wrap up this deep dive, let's look at the incredible arc we've covered today. We started in the murky neurobiological waters of childhood development, recognizing that sacrificing your authentic self to secure the vital attachment of your caregivers is not a character flaw.
It is a brilliantly rational, life-saving survival tool for an infant.
But it becomes a debilitating, literally physically dangerous trap in adulthood. We explored how the chronic agreeableness of the Type C personality represses healthy aggression, disarms our biological defenses, and floods our bodies with cortisol until we literally become sick.
And then we examine how we are thrust into a modern digital society that hijacks that exact childhood trauma.
We are put on a treadmill of amor propria, endless self-optimization, and hyperreal prophilicity. We become alienated managers of our own internal panopticons, performing for an algorithm that feeds on our insecurities.
But the way out is available. True health, both emotional and physical, requires a radical shift. It requires moving from defensiveness to Roger's openness to experience.
It requires honoring your internal gut signals, stepping out of the digital validation machine, and using Vervaeke's framework to risk the terror of rejection in order to live a fluid, genuinely resonant life.
You have to make the conscious adult choice of love over fear.
Which brings us to a final provocative thought to leave you with. Something to mull over as you close this app and go about the rest of your day. Imagine what would happen if two people, both entirely operating from their undefended, authentic selves, met for the very first time.
No masks.
No prophilicity, no desperate attempts to manage the other person's perception, no defectiveness schema pulling the strings, just pure, resonant, participatory presence. Now scale that up. If our entire modern society, our consumer economy, our corporate structures, and our digital infrastructure are built almost entirely on the friction, the insecurities, and the monetization of our protective masks, what would a society built entirely on radical authenticity actually look like?
It would be fundamentally unrecognizable. The economy of insecurity would collapse overnight.
The real question is, would our current world even survive it? And are you brave enough to start the collapse within yourself? We'll leave you with that. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, trust your gut, and we will catch you next time.